Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1250 of the Juicebox Podcast. For those of you who have been enjoying the Resilience series, this is the fourth and final part. And if you're just tripping over it now, go back. There's 3 other parts. This is Resilience in 4 parts with Erika Forsyth, licensed marriage and family therapist and person with type 1 diabetes. Check out Erika at erikaforsyth.com. I know that Facebook has a bad reputation, but please give the private Facebook group for the Juicebox Podcast a healthy once-over. Juicebox Podcast, type 1 diabetes. The group now has 47,000 members in it. It gets 150 new members a day. It is completely free, and at the very least, you can watch other people talk about diabetes. And everybody is welcome. Type 1, type 2, gestational, loved ones, everyone is welcome. Go up into the featured tab of the private Facebook group, and there you'll see lists upon lists of all of the management series that are available to you for free in the Juicebox Podcast. Becoming a member of that group, I really think it will help you. TouchedByType1.org. Touched by Type 1 is sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast, and I'm going to be speaking at their big in-person event in Orlando, Florida, coming up very soon. There are still tickets available. They are absolutely free. It's a wonderful event. TouchedByType1.org. Go to the programs tab and get yourself your free tickets. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense CGM. And sure, all CGM systems use transcutaneous sensors that are inserted into the skin and last 7 to 14 days. But the Eversense sensor is inserted completely under the skin, lasting 6 months. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. Learn more and get started today at contournext.com/juicebox. Erika, we're back. This is the 4th part of our Resilience series. You and I were just talking off mic a little bit about this first little bit. Is it going to stay here in this episode? Or are we going to put it in the end of the 3rd one? So let's get started and just see how it all flows for us.
Yes, fair? That sounds great.
Okay. Why'd you say that? Like, what about this part that's coming up made you go, ooh, should this have been in the 3rd one?
Great. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think because in our last episode, in the previous episode that we recorded, we were reviewing kind of the different layers, so to speak, of trauma, whether it was a first, a one event, capital T trauma, a kind of repeated pattern of small t trauma, or were you experiencing pain as a result of doing something for the first time? And then this next part, I think we were debating whether to include it last time or not, because we had talked about a lot of different things, is really thinking about the formal diagnosis of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, in response to a diagnosis of diabetes or any other chronic illness. That's why I'm wondering, would it be fit better in our previous recording?
Conversation. Okay, so
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll jump into it and we'll see how it flows. That's all. Go ahead.
So we have discussed, and research has proven that PTSD or trauma or long-term adversity does impact your systems of your body, and it does increase your risk of health issues, right? And mental health issues, physical illness and mental health issues. But if we look at that conversely, medical diagnosis of illness or disease, and we're talking about cardiovascular disease, lung disease, cancer, or our autoimmune diseases, obviously we know that can be traumatic and leads to true experiences of PTSD. Mm-hmm. And I thought it would be important to recognize research that was done by Donald Edmondson in 2014. And his research showed and highlighted that an estimated 12 to 25% of people diagnosed with a life-threatening illness go on to develop PTSD. And so in that category, he created what is called the enduring somatic threat model of PTSD. So EST for short. So I thought it'd be interesting for us to kind of understand, what does that mean? What does that look like? And how is it different from typical PTSD.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So here are some differences. So PTSD results from a discrete and external event that we've talked about, the war example. We've talked about, whether it's an abuse or a one-time rape incident or assault. So the source of that threat is external, and it's important to know that it has a beginning and an end. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So with the enduring somatic threat model, that results from the diagnosis and treatment of a life-threatening illness, such as cancer, heart attack, diabetes. And the source of the threat is internal versus this external thing that happened to you one time. It's an internal somatic threat that is enduring and without a definite end. So he really, through his research, recognized that, kind of validating all the things that we've been talking about, that you can experience PTSD from this threat that is internal and doesn't have an ending. So those are kind of the major differences of kind of classic PTSD versus this EST model. Okay, should I keep going?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just want to make sure I understand the internal somatic threat. So I just asked our chat GPT overlord about it.
Uh-huh.
So let's see. The concept is often associated with various physical sensations or symptoms that the individual interprets as signals of a serious medical condition or health threat. Internal somatic threats can trigger anxiety, stress, fear, particularly in individuals with heightened health anxiety or somatic symptom disorders. Key aspects: physical sensations, perception of harm, physiological impact, behavioral responses, underlying conditions. Okay. I just wanted to give that a little more of a definition, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
So the occurrence and the time perspective is significant, right? Because we have this past, present, and future experience. So from the diabetes perspective, you have the diagnosis, and we've talked about how that can be a capital T one-time event trauma in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the past, present medical intervention and the fear of, when we talk about future recurrence, that can be, we often think about you go through cancer, you go through the treatment, you are in remission, but then you're living with this anticipation of future recurrence. But I know this can happen with diabetes of, for example, having a seizure.
Right.
And then you're experiencing all of these symptoms and doing your best to prevent it. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So your experience is hypervigilance, where when we think about hypervigilance with PTSD, and we talked about this example in one of the previous episodes, of you hear that the boom of the motorcycle blast or a car, what is that, backfiring?
Mm-hmm.
And that instantly, if you have PTSD from war combat, that sound instantly takes your mind and body back to that one-time past incident of being in combat. In the EST model, the vigilance is to the internal sensation or symptom in one's body. So if we're going back to the seizure example, you start to you see the arrows maybe starting to go diagonally down. You might start to feel the low symptom, and you're hypervigilant to that. And then you start to experience the anxiety and the fear around, oh my gosh, am I going to have a seizure? Mm-hmm. That also contributes to your decisions, choices. Can you be alone? Can you go out in a car? Can you go to public places? Do you let yourself go below a certain number because you were near that number?
I interviewed a woman the other day who's had diabetes for 9 years. As soon as she was diagnosed as an adult, they just gave her insulin, really didn't tell her what she was doing with it. And this one time, she's sort of alone in her house. Her husband's with her kids somewhere else. She starts getting low, goes in the kitchen, eats a bunch of stuff, sits on the floor, is panicking, sitting on the floor. She talks about it like it happened yesterday, and it was 8 years ago. And she still won't try an insulin pump because what she told me was, I figured out how to control this now. I don't want to change anything. But what I felt like I was hearing from her was, I was a slightly anxious person before diabetes. But then I got it, and then this low happened, and now I am scared for anything to happen that is not something that I feel like I'm in control of. She's in therapy trying to figure it out. Consciously, she understands it, but she can't make good decisions for herself. Anyway, that seems like what you're talking about here to me. The Contour NextGen blood glucose meter is the meter that we use here. Arden has one with her at all times. I have one downstairs in the kitchen, just in case I want to check my blood sugar. And Arden has them at school. They're everywhere that she is. ContourNext.com/juicebox. Test strips and the meters themselves may be less expensive for you in cash out of your pocket than you're paying currently through your insurance for another meter. You can find out about that and much more at my link, ContourNext.com/juicebox. Contour makes a number of fantastic and accurate meters, and their second chance test strips are absolutely my favorite part. What does that mean? If you go to get some blood and maybe you touch it and, I don't know, stumble with your hand and like slip off and go back, it doesn't impact the quality or accuracy of the test. So you can hit the blood, not get enough, come back, get the rest without impacting the accuracy of the test. That's right. You can touch the blood, come back and get the rest, and you're going to get an absolutely accurate test. I think that's important because we all stumble and fumble at times. That's not a good reason to have to waste a test strip. And with the Contour NextGen, you won't have to. ContourNext.com/juicebox. You're going to get a great reading without having to be perfect. How many times have you thought, it's time to change my CGM? I just changed it. And then you look and realize, my God, it's been 14 days already, a week and a half. Feels like I just did this. Well, you'll never feel like that with the Eversense CGM, because Eversense is the only long-term CGM with 6 months of real-time glucose readings, giving you more convenience, confidence, and flexibility. So if you're one of those people who has that thought that I just did this, didn't I? Why do I have to do this again right now? If you don't like that feeling, give Eversense a try, because with Eversense, you'll replace the sensor just once every 6 months via a simple in-office visit. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox to learn more and get started today. Would you like to take a break to take a shower? You can with Eversense without wasting a sensor. Don't want anybody to know for your big day? Take it off. No one has to know. Have your sensors been failing before 10 or 14 days? That won't happen with Eversense. Have you ever had a sensor get torn off while you're pulling off your shirt? That won't happen with Eversense. So no sensor to get knocked off. It's as discreet as you want it to be. It's incredibly accurate, and you only have to change it once every 6 months. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox.
Yes, it's the hypervigilance, the hyperarousal, the mood shifts, the cognition around like, I know why I'm doing this or choosing to not do the certain thing, but the fear is keeping them paralyzed because you're trying to do anything you can to avoid that trauma.
Oh, she told me that her husband will text during the day and ask how her blood sugar is, but he doesn't really care about her blood sugar. He cares about her mood. He attaches to how her blood sugar is doing. And it's not because if she's high, she's cloudy, or if she's low, she's shaky. It's because, you're actually tying together that conversation for me with this. Okay. All right. I got it.
Right. So do I feel safe and secure because I'm going to make up a number 150 or 200 and stable? Or am I feeling really nervous because I'm below a certain number, right?
Yeah.
Those numbers are arbitrary. People who have this experience, and it is really common when they have a traumatic incident around insulin and particularly low blood sugar seizures, they can't figure out why it happened. So then you're going to be super vigilant to try and protect and prevent it from happening again.
It's the other thing she talked about. Isn't that something? Wow. Where were you yesterday when I was talking to her? She was talking about she needs to know why it's happening. It's very important to her to know why what's happening is happening. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, cool. Wow. Look at me. I'm learning stuff.
Yes.
Go ahead. What else you got?
Okay, so in the case of what we're calling or how Dr. Edmondson says, the medically caused PTSD, we're considering in terms of an EST model, avoidance not only precludes emotional integration of the trauma. So that means like, okay, so avoiding the emotional integration, meaning, okay, starting at diagnosis, like, what does this mean? I don't know. And wanting to maybe even deny what this actually means. And this is, any kind of chronic illness diagnosis applies to this. To then the actual dealing with it, right? You might go through a period of shock, denial, not quite sure what to do, how to manage. Who do you tell? Do you keep it to yourself? Are you including people in this journey? And also the actual treatment, right? Like you might start avoiding, because of this traumatic experience that you have, you're avoiding the doctor's appointments, you're avoiding treating, the kind of insulin management or any kind of medication management for the illness.
Yeah.
So it has this, and we've talked about this again, but really I'm trying to do it from this EST model, how this can affect your experience with your diagnosis. Okay.
Yeah, I'm so interested. I don't want to read ahead. Are we going to find out that there are big things like big T, little t in this scenario too? Like, are there going to be, because what I'm sitting here thinking is, I had a recent conversation with an endocrinologist and we talked a lot about how some people just don't get it, or they're not motivated, or they don't try or whatever. And I'm sitting here thinking, is that just maybe their situation? Did they have poor upbringing? Did they have an alcoholic parent? Like, did they have, like, 2 or 3 things off the ACEs list? Is it a money thing? Is it they live in a dirty house and they don't know where to put their stuff down? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is it more, it's gotta be more entailed than just, I don't know, I met a guy today at 2:00 and he don't seem to care. Like, nobody doesn't care about staying alive, right? You know what I mean? Okay.
Right.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I think that the challenge, like, let's say if you were the endo and you were presented with a case such as someone who was avoiding treating, managing their diabetes in the way that is expected, or, kind of doing the bare minimum to stay alive and be healthy, there's always more to it. So I think that the challenge is when let's say you had this case in front of you, is that person in a season of diabetes distress? Are they in a season of diabetes burnout? Has their distress manifested itself becoming depression? Is it because, right, most everyone in their lifetime is going to experience either diabetes distress or burnout. If you're living or caregiving, it just is natural and normal.
Yeah.
But with the difference that we've talked about before is if you are still functioning pretty well in your relationships, in your job, in other aspects and areas of your life, then that is diabetes distress. We know that it evolves and presents itself depression when your functioning is impaired across multiple areas of your life. Okay. So then, or is it you are experiencing medical induced PTSD? Is this the way that you are interacting and experiencing your chronic illness? Is that because of your experience of previous ACEs, of previous trauma? Is it you grew up in a very stable household, but over time, for whatever reason, the genetics of your brain, the generational history, other things that are going on in your life, you get this diagnosis and you are experiencing it and living with it as if you had PTSD, and to his case saying, yes, you might have with this enduring somatic threat model.
Yeah.
To answer your question, yes, it could be all of these things. It's usually layered. And that's why it's complicated to help people when they are struggling with their diabetes.
And may be difficult to talk about because it seems to me, when I see a group of people together, often the people who have awareness about what they're struggling with look weak to other people. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying? Like when somebody's like, I had this happen to me and I know that's why I feel this way and I'm trying to get past it. And then people are like, snowflake. Meanwhile, the person saying snowflake, they had stuff happening to them too. They're just keeping it down and not talking about it. You're not obviously a weak person to understand what's happening to you. But I think that when they try to talk about it in a world where everyone's not on the same page, they come off as like a hippie or complaining or like that. Do you know what I mean by that? Like, so does that make it difficult to like voice this? Like, where do you find a safe, oh my God, am I going to say safe space?
Yes, you are.
Jesus. Look what you've done to me. Where are you going to find a safe space to open up about that so that you can get some support and get yourself through the next piece? Oh, all right. There's no question in there. I just wanted to say that out loud.
That was yes. Okay. Yes, because there is, and I think what you were kind of looking around in the area of like, are you using this to justify or even make excuses for why you act a certain way? And if we pull this out in a bigger perspective, yeah, go ahead.
Or you just onto something here and you're figuring out what's going on with you. You know what I mean?
Yes. And so there's a difference, and that's depends on where you are in that journey, right? Of understanding.
I'm going to say right here, in case she ever listens to this, I have this struggle with my wife because I have you see it with me. Like sometimes I'm like, oh my God, like, right. And I start like understanding something. If I say that to Kelly sometimes, she'll go, don't make up an excuse. And I'm like, oh, she wants me to apologize here for something, or she wants me to admit something or something like that. And I'm in the middle of going, hey, I used to be here, but I think I'm here now with my understanding. And she's like, no, we haven't gotten, I see what's happening. Okay. Like, so she and I are having some sort of a thing. Doesn't matter what it is. And I kind of get my thinking together and elevate past it, but she's still back there where she might've been like, I told you this was what was happening and you said it wasn't. And so she wants to finish this. And so if I try to just jump past it, she kind of goes like, don't make up an excuse. And I'm like, oh no, this is not an excuse. Like I've had a real revelation just now. And okay. I'm sorry. That was probably too personal. Sorry.
No, it's good. I think you're shedding light into the process of understanding and then integration of that understanding. Right. And then how it impacts your communication, your relationships, all of that.
Because what we're going to talk about next, to me, feels like this is where it starts. So I'm sorry, I'm putting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit, but
yes,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think, and we can skip. Do you want to move into the resilience piece?
Sure. Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay. Because I think we've understood and highlighted the connection between PTSD, chronic illness, vice versa. And in the world of diabetes in general, there's also tons of research around adversity and trauma and how that connects to diabetes and diagnoses in general. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right.
So
we've talked all about this. Now we know what it is and we know how it's hurting us. What do we do about it?
Now what?
Yeah.
Now what? How do we become more resilient in the face of this understanding of how trauma impacts us? Mm-hmm. Okay. So one of the biggest things that we want to spend a lot of time on is connection. And all of the research says that one of the biggest protective measures and things to address and identify is your connection. Who is your support system? Where do you feel seen, validated, and that you matter? Mm-hmm. Where do you feel safe? Who are you connected to in a way that feels like it's a reciprocal relationship? So those things I encourage you to think about if you're struggling and feeling like, okay, I'm stuck. I understand I have this trauma, and now you're telling me to connect to people. How do I do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of Brené Brown's books, The Gifts of Imperfection, where she's done 20 years of research, and out of this research, she picks up themes, and she identified 5 things that are the most common factors of resilient people. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm going to list these and then we're going to go into like, okay, what do I do with this? How do I get into these?
Go ahead. Yeah.
How to become more support. Okay. I'll just go. They are resourceful and have good problem solving skills. Number 2, they are more likely to seek help. Number 3, they hold the belief that they can do something that will help them to manage their feelings and to cope. Number 4, they have social support available to them. Number 5, they are connected with others, such as family and friends. Mm-hmm. Okay, so one of the themes there are connection, resourcefulness, hope. Now, that's really hard to do if you are living in a place of stuckness, right? Because of your trauma, because of maybe depressive thoughts and feelings, maybe because of anxiety. So it's hard to make this leap. So I'm hoping that through our conversation, we can kind of shed some light into how to get to that place. Okay. So going back to Dr. Perry, who I've referenced a ton, he also agrees with that the best predictor of your current functioning is your current connection. And he says, independent of how bad things were in the past, how bad your trauma was, adversity, how bad things are right now, if you are in connection, you are in an environment where you will have many opportunities for healing. He talks about how you might see the best therapist in the world once a week, and that will help you process some of your past pain and trauma. But if you aren't in connection and seeing other people in a reciprocal relationship, it's really challenging to get better.
Okay.
So with that,
I'm sorry.
Yes.
if you don't see people in a reciprocal relationship or you don't have one or both?
Both.
Okay.
Because that gets into loneliness. Oftentimes, when people have experienced, well, pretty much I'd say all the time, when people experience trauma, they experience a sadness that can lead to a sense of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes when people, and we, that's why, there's people find support and connection in Facebook groups, and we're so hungry for that because people are lonely. There's a risk to that, which we'll get into, right? But people experience loneliness as a result of a diagnosis of a chronic illness because nobody understands it initially. And when people, so loneliness, what you just got into, what you just reflected, Scott, was really interesting because loneliness is a feeling of sadness due to perceived lack of companionship, friendship, or any social bond or relationship. So it's a perceived lack of reciprocal relationship, right? So if you enter into a conversation with someone and you're anticipating to get something back from them that you didn't, you feel lonely.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, I feel really close to this, even the checker at the grocery store, but maybe the checker's having a hard day and they keep their head down. Like, oh, I didn't feel like I had that connection that we used to. That's a really minor example. Okay. So, because when you're lonely, you're in self-preservation mode, which prevents healthy social interactions. So you're it's like this vicious cycle, right? Where if you're feeling like no one understands me, I'm suffering, I'm going to preserve myself. So I'm not going to engage in conversation or connection with people. And then that perpetuates that perceived lack of friendship and connection. You
can feel lonely, but still be around people, right?
It's different from alone, right? Okay. Like you can be, the common example is like the billionaire and everyone wants to be their friend and he's talking to people or she's talking to people all day long, but she can go home and feel lonely.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm having, just so you know, before we move forward, I feel very sad right now because there's a person that I'm connected to who I've seen in crisis like 2 years ago now. They're doing much better now, but I was there during their crisis and he kept saying that people don't care about him, but he was in a room full of people who were trying to help him. And I think I realized over the last couple of years that he had put himself in such a position with all these people that they all had some trouble with him to the point where he felt like they didn't care about him anymore. And I think he knew he put himself in that position, but yet he didn't do it willfully. If I look at that ACEs list, he's got 5 of those contributing factors. He was on this collision course probably since he was 5 years old. And to watch it as an adult happen to him, like as you're talking, I'm thinking about him. I almost cried a minute ago, just like having a memory about him because I thought, Jesus, this is all about how he grew up. Like he's a good person. He loves these people. Like, you know what I mean? Like he didn't do any of these things maliciously. It's really, really something. And I'm watching him work out of it now. I'm proud of him, but it's taken a long time. It's interesting to reflect back on it just now. Also, I can't cry in the middle of this, so I had to tell you. Well, so I wasn't holding it in.
No, I saw you going. You were in a place of reflection. Yeah. I could tell.
I needed to let it out so that I could keep listening to you and talking. So sorry, but
no, that's good. But yeah. And I have to bring up this. I wasn't gonna. This is from a quote from Brene Brown that I wasn't going to talk about today, but I have it up that I have to just quote right now because it summarizes exactly what you were just describing with your friend. She says, "Out of our woundedness, we protect ourselves by being as unlikable as possible. So we beat people to the punch from hurting us, and then we ensure our demise because the thing that we need to overcome our woundedness is relationship. But the risk of hurt and the risk of having the old tapes reactivated is too great." So that is how loneliness is this kind of vicious cycle, right? Where you're preserving yourself. And because you're acting out of your woundedness, your trauma, all the things that you have been exposed to in life, you ensure the demise because you're just going to be like, nope, I'm not going to engage and I don't want to get hurt.
Just simply said, I'm going to make sure you break up with me before I break up with you before you break up with me. That kind of thing. Yeah.
That can for sure.
Yeah, you see that happen a lot. But that's the same idea. So that's so horrible. Jeez. Okay. What's that quote from? Is that from a book, or do you know where that quote is from?
That's probably from The Gifts of Imperfection.
Okay.
That she, in one of her, yes, I'll have to look exactly, or it's from her podcast talking about her book, but it was around, the theme of loneliness. And she also quotes John Cacioppo, who I can't remember if we referenced this in the beginning, who did a bunch of work and research on loneliness. And he says loneliness is like an iceberg. It goes deeper than we can see. And loneliness is a better predictor of early death than smoking, obesity, cancer. It just is another reflection of all the things we've been talking about, that everything matters and everything is connected. And so if we've experienced trauma, we can feel lonely. It can become the self-perpetuating vicious cycle where you feel like nobody understands. You don't have any kind of reciprocal relationship. And that is really hard to then hear me say. I guess I want to spend it, it's why I'm spending some time here. I understand the challenge. And we're like, well, all you have to do is just get connected to people to become more resilient. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to understand, if you're kind of feeling connected or in agreement with some of these things, that you are lonely, to understand what is the source of the loneliness? Mm-hmm. And has that manifested itself into depression? Or is it a response to trauma? Is it a response to a loss? Which we talk about diabetes, there is a loss, right?
Yeah.
Did you have a move? Did you change jobs? It can be something that a major stressor, like a change in relationship, a change in job, a change in your environment. We all have moments of loneliness in our lives, but if we don't pause and look around and note that that's happening, it can very quickly develop into a prolonged issue and challenge. Okay.
Do you think there's a spectrum of this? Like, we're talking about these kind of big examples of people having like big problems, but could people be going through this on, I don't know, smaller scales and not seeing big problems, so they're not aware of it? Like, do you think that some variation of this happens to all of us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we are human. We are created and built to be in connection and relationship. That's kind of an understanding. Consequently, we also, because we have this human need to connect and relate because of life and stress and change, we are going to experience moments of loneliness. Mm-hmm. It's not abnormal to have that. But if we continue, I'm thinking of like there's a move, you move cities, states, and you're going to experience some loneliness initially. But maybe because of other factors going on in your life, it's hard to start reaching out and connect.
Yeah. Or you don't even notice it right away, maybe.
That's right.
Yeah. Feels like, I'm so busy, I can't meet anybody or something like that. And you're lonely, but you don't. I know Cole was lonely when he went to Atlanta, and I asked him about it constantly, and he always said no. But I don't believe that he wasn't, honestly. So,
Yes. And it takes time. Like if it's one of those external, changes, it takes time to adjust. But even in that space, to get connected with people is hard. And that's where the vulnerability piece comes in. So what do you do if you're thinking, okay, gosh, I'm lonely? Oftentimes they say, a lot of people will say, well, just go out and meet people, go to the group things, join groups online. Those things can help, but it really, if it's become a struggle for a long period of time, the duration of your experience of feeling lonely has been so long and it's impacting all your functioning, that's when it's time to say, okay, why did I start to become lonely? What was the circumstance that triggered this experience? Mm-hmm. And kind of start to unpack that. And then you start to kind of relearn how to connect, trust, relate, and be vulnerable with people. And it's a journey. It's a process.
It's hard to find people you even jive with sometimes. Like sometimes finding people is not the problem. Finding the right people is the problem. And how do you do that even, especially as an adult, once you're working and everything? It's, I'm sorry. You're painting a hopeless picture. I
know. Okay. But we're going to come through this here.
Okay.
Yes. We're okay. So so we now know, okay, those are the factors of resilient people. Now, how do you develop those factors? How do you develop resilience?
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that Brené Brown, and I know I've mentioned it a ton, is the vulnerability piece. And she defines vulnerability as experiencing uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Now, if you're operating from a place of grieving, trauma, you're like, heck no, am I going to go and be vulnerable because I don't feel safe? That again perpetuates itself.
Yeah.
So understanding that, I love this quote that she says, if we are brave enough often enough, we are going to fail. And this is the physics of vulnerability. So if you're in this place of like loneliness and you're like, I can't risk anything, I don't want to be wounded, I'm not going to be vulnerable, you stay there. But if we lean into, as a society, as a culture, that we are going to make mistakes, we are going to fail, but we have to take this risk to expose ourselves.
Because you're failing now, so you might as well fail moving forward and see if something doesn't work out.
Yeah.
If I stand here and I don't move, this is always going to be like this. If I move forward, it might still be like this, but at least I can keep moving forward. And then one day, oh my God, this worked this time. But it's never going to work sitting on your sofa, I guess is the way to put it, right? Like you got to get up and go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So how do you do that? How do you get up and go? Okay. So these 4 things, according to Brené Brown, is the first thing is to develop hope.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're depression, it's one of the key symptoms and experiences is despair. So again, we're holding these things in like, okay, if you are experiencing depressive, anxiety, traumatic symptoms and behaviors, there needs to be a component of treatment, of real professional help in conjunction with these other things. Okay. So developing hope. And oftentimes, and you've talked about this, you've always had hope and positive mindset. Is that because of your genes? Maybe, but it's also a choice. I think we often think of like it's a feeling, like, oh, I feel really hopeful today,
No,
but it's
definitely
a choice.
Yeah.
And psychologist Dr. Snyder says there are 3 steps to that. You got to set goals that are realistic. You have to plan towards those goals, and then have the knowledge and the understanding that you're going to achieve them, but with the caveat that you're going to fail.
Yeah.
There's going to be moments of disappointment, and increasing that tolerance to the disappointment is part of that journey. So I think so often when we're feeling stuck and hopeless, it's hard to say, okay, today I'm going to get out of bed and brush my teeth. Like, what's the point? Right? And some days you might not get out of bed and brush your teeth, but setting that first goal of like, I'm going to get out of bed, I'm going to brush my teeth, and I'm going to change out of the shirt I was wearing yesterday to the shirt I'm wearing today.
Yeah.
That's a goal. That's a plan. And know you're going to do it with the understanding that you might fail, and that's okay some of the days.
My son's been having these conversations with me about time and memory. And I was talking to him the other day and I said, everything you're telling me really makes me think over and over again that life is just now. It's a super simple thing to say, but like, if I'm not actually remembering my memories exactly right to begin with, right? You know what I mean? Then that means that in its best moment, that memory is when it was happening. And so that means that right now is my new best moment. I'm going to continue to have new best moments. I can't live in the future, although I can set up hope for the future. I definitely can't live in the past because the past isn't even exactly how you remember it to begin with. So now is life. That idea of like, what's going to get me up and get me moving, to me is, I don't want my life to be sitting here. I would just much rather die trying, I guess. Like that's sort of, I know it seems like too heavy-handed, but it's right. It's a common saying. Like, I just want to get moving and then see what happens. If it doesn't go well, it's no worse than sitting here not trying, in my mind. And you're saying that there are going to be some people in a situation that is so maybe dire, they're going to need professional help to get back to that idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And sometimes even that's when, medication could be beneficial too, antidepressants and anxiety medication to get you back to that baseline. right? Oftentimes, I think we think about medication as like, oh no, it's going to be this lifetime thing that I need. But most often when psychologists, psychiatrists prescribe medication, it's to help people get back to that place of being able to have hope to get up and brush their teeth and get out of bed.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So having hope, which is the choice, it's a way of thinking.
Mhm.
The second thing, these are ways to help how to become more resilient. Number 2, use critical awareness to combat societal pressures. So societal pressures, this means evaluating the media that you observe, you read, you intake and consume, and the expectations that it communicates. So this is really a critical piece because from the moment you're born and now to present day, social media, TV, I mean, back in the day it was like commercials, right?
Magazine covers, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. When I grow up, it was like, yeah, you're not the magazine cover, but it's all of this input and messaging that you are not good enough unless you look this way, buy this thing, do this exercise, eat this way.
Yeah.
It's really easy though when you're lonely or feeling hopeless or in despair to scroll, to be influenced by these societal pressures.
Mhm.
So this is where, we talk about the pro cons of any kind of diabetes online community. It could really help decrease that feeling of isolation
Yeah.
and find support. But you also, if you are finding that you're looking at this and scrolling and saying, well, I can't get a 6.2 and I'm not a good enough caregiver. I'm not a good enough diabetic. I'm not a good enough pre-bolus, or that messaging becomes really easily ingrained if you are not aware of how that is influencing your mindset. Okay.
The scrolling ruins everything. By the way, access, I can't believe I'm saying this.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
access ruins
It's you.
everything. Like, look how my examples are not going to be palatable for some people, but this social media has ruined boobs for me. Like, it was used to be so exciting to see a lady, and now it's just not anymore. You're like, oh yeah, look, this woman's breastfeeding in the Walmart. Okay. And movies too, access to like entertainment. Everyone has sat in their living room for 90 minutes scrolling through choices and not ended up watching something because you're like, I can't pick anything. Back when you were like, hey, guess what? Indiana Jones is out. You want to watch a movie? That's the one we're watching. There is no other one.
Yeah.
Well, what about Star Wars? That's not in the theater anymore. You can watch that again in 10 years. When that used to exist, you took advantage of what was there. Now there's so much there, it overwhelms you. You get frozen. And so I think you're talking about something similar, honestly. It's like there's so much access to so many images and ideas that your brain just goes, I'm not those things. And then and you can't move, And meanwhile, I know this is overstated, but everybody's not beautiful. A lot of beautiful people put themselves on social media, but there are far more people like me and, and like you listening who are like, look, I'm not perfect, but I don't need to be perfect and I can't be perfect. But back in the day, in the 70s, it was like, well, I don't look like Cheryl Tiegs, but she was also the only one you knew who looked like that. I mean, Erika, right? You go on Instagram, every fucking person looks like a model. You're like, oh my God, is the whole world beautiful? No. But Instagram is. Stop going where those people are and then judging yourself against them. It's so funny. Like, we don't do it with anything else. I don't watch a baseball game and go, oh, I can't believe I can't hit a 420-foot home run. I just think those are special people who can do that thing. I'll watch it. But when it happens in these other spaces, it really does make you feel terrible sometimes. You're like, oh, God, I'm never going to get to this. You were never trying to get to that. But all of a sudden, now you are. Now you're in a race you didn't even mean to be running. Anyway.
Yes, because that tape that's being so easily triggered and replayed over and over again, I'm not good enough. It's hard to come out of that and say, well, I'm going to go build hope and follow my goals that I just set for myself, right? So just having, and I know thankfully we're talking about it more and more, but just having that awareness around how much it's influencing your mindset, your choices, your thoughts about yourself and others is really, really important.
You can start feeling like if I can't be that, then nothing's worthwhile being. which is ridiculous because there's 4 of those people. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Right.
And it could say it can kind of, catastrophize it and globalize it, right? Like, oh, I didn't nail my pre-bolus or my A1C. I must be a really terrible mother or whatever it is.
It
right?
starts to bleed into other things.
Yeah.
Right. If I can't do this, I must not be good at that either. Okay.
Yes.
Jeez.
As opposed to, oh, you know what? Gosh, I goofed today, but I'm still doing the best I can. And I'm a great person,
If you can't figure out a way to stop looking at it, I would go from the aspect of somebody is sitting in a room right now who knows you're going to feel like that if they tune their algorithm the right way. And they're doing that to make you feel that way, to keep you in that algorithm longer. Be mad at them and just leave. Like for that reason, it's almost like smoking to me. I know I've told you this before, but I told my brother one time when he was a little kid, I was like, there are 10 really rich people sitting in a boardroom right now laughing that you bought those cigarettes. Yeah. And so, go ahead and make them rich if you want to. But
power and money. Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Refused. Can I read one?
Yeah.
I never get to read anything. Hold on a
second.
second.
Read the next one. Read number 3.
All right. Number 3, refuse to numb your negative emotions. Avoiding feeling negative emotions such as sadness, disappointment, shame, anger via alcohol, drugs, shopping, scrolling. It may eventually look like avoiding looking at numbers, avoiding pre-bolusing, avoiding calculating, or even guessing the best you can about your diabetes. So wait a minute. How does that do that? Go ahead. Tell me.
Okay. Refuse to numb your negative emotions. This is a really big one. Okay. Because when you're trying to build resilience, which is right, like overcoming adversity, having the hope that you can achieve your goals. Once you start to feel like going from number 2, you're starting to feel I'm not good enough, and you're starting to feel that sadness or disappointment or shame. We are a society that numbs those hard to have feelings. So you're numbing often with alcohol, drugs, going back to the scrolling, which is perpetuating that I'm not good enough feeling or thought. And then you're starting to numb everything and avoiding, right? So this can even play out to like, what's the point? I'm going to numb and avoid taking care of my diabetes through that because you don't even want to feel it, right? So you're going to avoid looking at the number. And this happened, it was easier to do when you didn't have your apps with your numbers all the time. But It was like, I'm not going to take my blood sugar. But now people might not look at the number on the app, right? I'm just going to avoid it. I'm going to not engage because I don't want to feel that feeling that I've associated with. If I have a disappointing or shameful feeling corresponding to a number, I'm going to avoid it. Does that make sense?
I had a woman tell me that she couldn't say the number out loud when her parents asked her. She'd like throw the meter at them so they could see it. But even if the number was good, bad, or indifferent, she couldn't bring herself to like utter the words. She didn't want to say it out loud. And this again is rolling back into this conversation I had with the doctor recently, because she goes, I had this one patient, I'd look at their clarity report. They were 400 for like days, which just indicated to her, they didn't even look at their CGM. And that's what you just said. Like, so like, even though the data is right in front of their face, they'll just willfully ignore it through this numbing process. This is interesting.
Right. Because you don't want to feel that. And that's if you have that association of shame connected to the numbers, right? So you're going to, and I'm kind of loosely connecting numbing to avoiding, but you're trying to avoid feeling those negative feelings. And so I'm saying you're kind of numbing, but really you're avoiding management. But does that make sense?
It does. I want to roll backwards for half a second, though. Back to number 2, the critical awareness, like about those societal pressures. So there's a difference for people. If someone goes online and it's like, hey, look, here's my A1C. It's 5.8. Here's how I did it. I just, you guys should try it if you want. There are people who will see that and go, oh, I'm going to try that. That's fantastic. And there are people who are going to try that, who are going to fall into this trap here. We're already in this trap, right? Then that becomes an argument, because this is a place where I had to make a decision a long time ago. Like, who am I going to be in this space? Am I going to be the woe is me person who just goes up to people who don't feel well and go, oh, I know it's terrible, or am I going to be the person who goes, I think this is possible. Like, here, look, someone's doing it. Like, aspire. Because you kind of can't be all things to all people, but being one or the other no matter how you present your information in this diabetes specific situation, some of the people are going to be pissed at you because they're going to say you're making me feel bad, or they're going to say, God, you knew the answer to this and you didn't share it to me. Right. Like no matter what I do, someone's going to hate me for it. And so I decided to go with hope because that's just kind of how I'm wired. And I thought I'll bring people along with me and hopefully we won't hurt too many people along the way. But I don't think shifting this to me for a second gets us off track, but that's not my responsibility, right?
Correct. Because
like how you're going to respond?
Yes, because we're only in control of our own thoughts and feelings and responses. We can't, control other people's reactions. However, we can be, that's not an excuse to be a jerk. When I know that's not what you're insinuating.
I'm obviously not being a jerk about it. But no. But my point is, if you're a person who's going to be triggered by that, it's incumbent upon you not to look at me then. Is that right? You don't get to send me an email and tell me I'm doing it wrong. Which is
right. Well, you could, but then you can also choose to not engage with it.
Yeah, just be done with it. Right. And that's what I would do normally. But do people who end up doing that, are they predisposed to doing that because they're so into this trap? Like they're already so far into this pit already, like maybe lashing out's the only thing they have left.
Perhaps that's the way that you're trying to kind of
make yourself feel better.
But also I think it's going back to the sense of where are you in your journey of resilience to say, you know what, in this example, okay, Scott is giving you the pro tip series, right? Or beginning series. One can look at that and digest that and say, well, good for him. I'm never going to be able to get that. It's more like an all or nothing thinking.
Yeah.
Or the alternative is to say with some hope, there's so many things. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm going to start with trying to pre-bolus just for my breakfast meal. And I might forget every other day, but I'm going to try this one thing.
Okay.
And I'm going to expect that I'm going to do it and have hope that I'm going to do it and have that mindset. But I'm also going to hold that there's this tolerance for disappointment in it. So your question of when people are lashing out and saying, why are you telling me?
Don't show me your great success. It makes me feel bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is a hot topic in the Facebook group. I know.
It's a hot topic in diabetes since the day I've been involved in it.
Well, in diabetes. Yeah. So I think it goes back to the delivery, and we've talked a ton about this, the delivery of the information, to be mindful and compassionate. But also holding that you can't control other people's responses. And then if you are the digester, you're consuming that information, being mindful of, why am I being triggered in this way? Is it because is it triggering this old tape in my brain that I am never going to get this? I am never going to be a good enough diabetic, right? So being mindful of those three things, the delivery, the tone, and then how are you consuming it? And is it triggering the tape? And for those of you, I don't know, tape is such an old thing.
No, you're making, listen, I asked the question because I think that's the answer. And this will sound pejorative for a second, but I don't mean it that way. If you make nerfing the world my responsibility, I'm not going to have any time to help all the people that have been helped by the podcast. There's got to be a point where I say, not everybody can accept this right now. Some people are going to be in this position that we're talking about, but that's why if you hear this and you feel that way, the reason I brought it up right here is if you hear this and you feel that way, go back, develop hope, use your critical awareness, do these 4 things that we're talking about here, because you're in that position right now, whether you know it or not. If you're busy telling me I'm the reason you feel bad, then, or anybody, it doesn't have to be me, I put it on myself for this, but if you're busy telling yourself they're the reason I'm not doing well, please hear me. You're probably trapped in a situation you might not even be completely aware that you're in. That's how I feel. I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but.
Well, yeah. I think it's a little bit different if we're sticking into this very specific example of you are very clear in your messaging and goal of helping people manage their diabetes, right? So maybe it becomes more confusing in that concept or that conversation when other people are saying, this works for me or do it this way.
Or when it's more manipulative, more social media manipulative or that kind of thing. Okay. All right. Like when they go,
Yes.
they say stuff like, do you feel like this? And you're like, oh my God, I do. And, and then the next thing you know, you're 3 swipes over in the Instagram story and they're offering you coaching for just $300 a month. And you're like, oh, asshole.
Right. I mean, we're going into, the boundaries conversation, which I think is a really fascinating one of how you are communicating with somebody else, how are you receiving someone else's communication, how is that impacting you?
Okay.
Is a whole other conversation around emotional, physical boundaries.
Yeah. Let me drop that so you can finish, and maybe we'll talk about it later. But
yeah. Okay. So the fourth thing that Brene Brown had identified through her 20 years of research is embracing spirituality. And she is very clear in that it's not about, when she says spirituality, I know people might think of church or religion, but it's actually a really different concept. And so she defines spirituality as recognizing and celebrating that we are all inextricably connected to each other by a power greater than all of us, and that our connection to that power and to one another is grounded in love and compassion. Practicing spirituality brings a sense of perspective, meaning, and purpose to our lives. So again, she goes through all different examples that people talk about, practicing their spirituality in houses of worship, like churches and mosques, or at the fishing hole, that most people do reference God, but it doesn't have to be. So it's this larger concept of interconnectedness that was identified as people who were resilient or working on becoming more resilient, which I think is a really important component, particularly as I think there's a reason why there's so much power in the diabetes community.
Yeah.
Because even in that essence of whether it's online or in person, however it is, you feel that connection.
Right. No, it's like when I can't do it, we can do it. That sort of feeling. Like you're not really with me, but I feel like you are. And whether that's a person on Facebook or God doesn't really matter as long as you have that feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
And recognizing it, celebrating it. And I think it is so painful when we see within the context of even just the diabetes community of people kind of going after each other because there's beauty in that. Like, no, we're all here together. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
Let's offer this compassion to one another. We all have different experiences of living with it. We all have different challenges because of our past, because of how we function, and because of how we process challenges. But to embrace that concept of like, we are connected, let's offer compassion to one another,
right,
breeds that sense of resilience.
This is such a lovely ending because I don't even know if Erika knows this or not, but I just got out of the shower one day and texted Erika and said, I'd like to talk about resilience on the podcast. Then she, weeks or months later, sends me back this document. She's like, I think this is the outline for maybe a 4-part series about resilience. And we're here at the end. And I'm like, oh my God, it's the things that are always important. You know what I mean? Like these always important things. I found them at the end of this path. And the part you may or may not be surprised by is I didn't read your document when you sent it to me. Like I wanted to experience it as we were talking about it. And so like while you were building the story for people, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious how we do it. You build the story. I have realizations. We chat through them, etc. But I swear to you, when we got the end here and it was like, I was like, oh, it's hope, critical awareness, not giving into pressure. Don't numb yourself, find community. I was like, God damn, how about that? Like, I actually, like at the end, I was like, I didn't think this was going to be how this ended. It makes a lot of sense that this is the end of what we're talking about. Truly,
Yes.
Wow. God.
They are. Yeah. They are like, as you said, kind of hallmarks. And like, yes, of course, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And yet it is hard to implement. But I think it's so important to end on this hopeful piece that this is what is identified and recognized in the research, in the literature, and it can be implemented. And if you are feeling stuck or challenged, even through these last 4 notes of hopefulness, awareness, refusing to numb, seeking spirituality, that there's something greater than just yourself.
Yeah.
To reach out for help again to whoever may be. And if even that part is feeling challenging, starting with whether it's a therapist or an email to, I was going to say to you,
Don't email me. I'm very busy. But I mean, listen, be hopeful. Believe in yourself. Don't listen to other people. Believe in yourself. Don't put your head in the sand. Go and find some community because you're going to need help. That's it. Like it's fantastic.
And community doesn't have to be, you don't have tons and tons of relationships if you're experiencing that loneliness, starting with one.
Could be a person. Yeah.
One other person.
I see people in the Facebook group become friends all the time. Like I don't like pry into their business, but like I know I'm thinking of this one person right now. I did a live thing the other night and I was like, oh, I wish this person was here. And somebody goes, I'll text them. And I thought, how the hell do you know how to text them? And then I realized, I was like, oh, they became friends through my little podcast. Isn't that nice? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's, and even if it's just the two of them, and I'm sure it's not, but even if it was just the two of them, now they've got, connection's the right word, but it seems lame to say, but like there's a synergy, like you can feel each other's energy this way. And when yours is waning, theirs can kind of make up for you. You know, like being hooked to a lot of different batteries almost. And one starts to go down and maybe you steal a little charge from the other one. Wow, this was great. Thank you. That. I'm going to text you more when I'm in the shower. I think it's working out really well.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This did not go anywhere like I thought it was going to go. I'm so pleasantly surprised by what you did here. Congratulations and bravo. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
While we're recording still, I never say nice things to you until we're done recording usually.
No.
but I don't know what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what did you anticipate?
I mean, I don't know. I'm a boy. Like these things that I do naturally, I don't see them thoughtfully like this. Do you know what I mean? Like I just figure I don't give up. And that's why stuff works for me. And I'm thoughtful about stuff and I pay attention and I move away from things that don't make sense to me. I don't let people tell me no. But in the end, if you ask me to quantify that, I'd just be like, I don't know, man, I'm just hard-headed. Like that's pretty much how it feels to me. And it's not true because as you were going through all this, I was like, oh, that is who I am, or that is what happens to me, or that is why I feel like that. And it's nice to have that feeling because it resolves tension and makes me feel lighter when it's over. Like that's literally what I would hope people get out of these 4 episodes. If they listen through them, I hope when it's over, they're not going to have an answer to their problem, but they might feel like it's more doable. Or they could at least understand the reason why it's happening to them so they can stop blaming themselves or somebody else.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Look at you.
Yes.
You're doing the Lord's work over here.
Good.
All right. I kept you over. I'm so sorry.
It's so good.
All right.
Thank you.
Hold on 1 second. I want to take another moment to thank Erika for all the hard work and preparation that she put into the Resilience series. And I want to remind you that you can hire Erika to be your therapist at erikaforsyth.com, or if you're in California, you can see her in person. A huge thank you to Eversense CGM for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Are you tired of having to change your sensor every 7 to 14 days? With the Eversense CGM, you just replace it once every 6 months via a simple in-office visit. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. Arden started using a contour meter because of its accuracy, but she continues to use it because it's durable and trustworthy. If you have diabetes, you want the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. There's already so many decisions. Let me take this one off your plate. contournext.com/juicebox. Are you still here? Why are you not getting your tickets to the Touched by Type 1 event, or at least checking them out on Facebook and Instagram? touchedbytype1.org. If you or a loved one was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and you're looking for some fresh perspective, the Bold Beginnings series from the Juicebox Podcast is a terrific place to start. That series is with myself and Jenny Smith. Jenny is a CDCES, a registered dietitian, and a type 1 for over 35 years. And in the Bold Beginnings series, Jenny and I are going to answer the questions that most people have after a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. The series begins at episode 698 in your podcast player, or you can go to juiceboxpodcast.com and click on Bold Beginnings in the menu. If you're not already subscribed or following in your favorite audio app, please take the time now to do that. It really helps the show. And get those automatic downloads set up so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.